Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're doing Who Was Better. The topic for this Who Was Better? Two guys that were rivals throughout most of their career, whether that be in each of their historic tag teams or in their solo runs. And that's Booker T and Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. Like I said, both these guys had storied careers, both as amazing tag teams with each one's brother, Stevie Ray and Rick. Both had amazing singles runs, specifically towards the end of WCW. They were two of the highlights of that show. So we're going to compare them. We have 8 different categories. Each category we grade on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. And at the end there is a chance for bonus points. We'll talk about that when we get there. With that being said, let's jump right in with the first category, technical wrestling. For technical wrestling, I'm going to give Booker T a 4. I do think he's very good at it. I wouldn't put him in that upper echelon. I wouldn't put him in the Chris Benoit, Mr. Perfect, Kurt Angle, AJ Styles level, but he is very good. So he's just a step below that for me. For Scott Steiner, I'm also going to give him a 4. Now, this is particularly for his Steiner Brothers run. Once he went solo, his moveset got a little bit limited, and I know CM Punk hates the word moveset. I think it's for all of us that grew up playing wrestling games and seen it so much, that's why we called him moveset. His repertoire, whatever you want to call it. And it wasn't because I don't think he could do the stuff any longer. I think it just fit his character better to change it to what it was. So for that, Scott's getting a 4 as well. Next up, striking. This is your punches, your kicks, all that fun stuff. For striking, I'm giving Booker T a 4 as well. Again, I think he was very good. I don't think he's a Kenta Kobashi or a Stan Hansen or a Yoshihiro Tajiri when it comes to striking, but I do think he's rather good at it. Same with Scott. Scott, I'm going to give a 4 as well. And the reason for that, like I said, I do think they're very good at this. I just don't think they're that upper echelon. Now, coming up next, our next category, how they wrestle as heels. For Booker, I'm giving Booker a 5. There are very few things that I've enjoyed in wrestling as much as I enjoyed the King Booker run, and that was just some of the best stuff I think that WWE did of that decade, or any wrestling company to be honest. Here's a guy who is genuinely a babyface. I mean, he's easy to love, he's charismatic, he's flashy, and all the fans want to get behind him, and you put him as King Booker, I thought it was awesome. Now on the other end, Scott Steiner, I'm also giving him a 5. I said it in the beginning of the video, these were two of the stalwarts, two of the highlights of the tail end of WCW as WCW was dying. These were the two guys that you still wanted to see, that you still tuned in for, and still gave their all the way through the end of the promotion. Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner, in my opinion, should have been the guy that took over the NWO Black and White when Hulk Hogan got ousted from it, which he sort of was pushed up towards the top, but he didn't ever really get that main focal point of the company push that some others had. But for me, I thought his Big Papa Pump run was fantastic. That's why he gets a 5. Now coming up next, how they perform as a babyface. For Booker, I'm giving Booker a 5. Like I said, he's a natural babyface. He's so charismatic. All the fans gravitate to him. Made it easy for him to be a babyface. For Scott Steiner, I'm giving Scott a 4. And I know what a lot of you guys will say. You guys will point to his run as the Steiner Brothers and them being one of the most over-faced tag teams of all time, which I fully agree with. Where I give him a little bit of a knock is once he morphed into Big Papa Pump, I don't think that character worked as well as a face as the younger Scotty Steiner did. So for me, he gets a 4, just a little bit out of the 5 range. Next category, promos. For Booker T, I'm giving Booker a 4. For all the great Booker T promos there are out there are some bad ones, and I'm not talking about the "We're Coming for You" promo. That's great. Booker had a tendency at times to kind of stumble over his words. When he was on, there's nobody better. He was right up there with the top of the food chain. But when he was off, he was very off. So for that, he's getting a 4. Scott Steiner, he's also going to get a 4. While the Steiner Math promo is probably one of my top 5 or 10 favorite promos of all time, and the promo where he just basically called out Ric Flair for being an old man was fantastic as well, Scott Steiner kind of had that Ultimate Warrior quality about his promos where you knew the intensity was there, but you don't know what the heck he was saying. There were sometimes he just rambled on and it made no sense at all, but he was really good. It was engaging. I just couldn't put him up there in the upper echelon with like a Ric Flair, a Stone Cold, The Rock, Mick Foley, guys that I all think are better at promos than either one of these guys. And this is no knock on these guys. These are two amazing talents. I just think that they're not quite at that top level for this. Next up, presentation. Starting with Booker. Booker's getting a 5. And the heavy lifting of that 5 is his King Booker run. I mentioned it earlier how King Booker was one of my favorite things that they did in that era. And just that presentation with Queen Charmel, with William Regal being with him, with the way he would hold his pinky out and the rings and the robe he wore, everything. It was amazing. And you add that to his prior incarnations where he had that awesome Harlem Heat theme song, which I think is a really great song. The Flames, which ties back all the way to his Harlem Heat days. While that version I don't think was necessarily a 5, it was probably a 4. But giving me the addition of the King Booker run, that brings him up to a 5 in my opinion. Now for Big Papa Pump, he's going to get a 4 here. And the reason for me and the difference between the two, his music, while recognizable, I don't think is as good. Just the siren, I don't think that's as good as what Booker had. His gear was iconic, especially during the Steiner Brothers neon days, or the white singlets with the airbrush Papa Pump on them and all that stuff. But when I look at it, other than like, let's say his chainmail thing that he wore, was there anything in his presentation that was any different than, let's say, Scott Norton? Scott Norton wore airbrush singlets. Was there anything different than Rhino? Rhino wore airbrush singlets. The chainmail was individual, yes, I'll give him that. And I thought he was very good. I just don't think there was that much different than what other wrestlers were doing. And yes, I understand if you see a Scott Steiner entrance, you immediately know who it is and immediately know what he's about. But for me, I just kind of think it was a little bit on the generic side. Coming up next, charisma. I'm just going to say this, both these guys are getting a 5. These are two of the most charismatic wrestlers that WCW ever had on their roster, and any company that they worked with either, whether that be WWE, TNA, WCW back in the day, Global Force for Booker T, Japan for Scott Steiner. Their charisma was off the charts. You automatically gravitated to these two wrestlers. You wanted to cheer Booker T. You wanted to boo Scott Steiner. You wanted to hang out with Scott Steiner and some of his freaks, and it was just really cool. I think both these guys are ultra charismatic. Their charisma helps bridge a lot of their deficiencies, which I don't think there's a lot. As you can see here, in most of these categories are rated either a 4 or 5, and spoiler, all of the categories are rated either a 4 or a 5 for both of them. I just think that charisma is what set them apart from the pack. It's what made Booker T different than, let's say, a Ken Shamrock. It's what made Steiner different than, let's say, an aforementioned Scott Norton. This is where they excelled. Now, last but not least, big game performance. How they perform in their main event matches, how they carry a pay-per-view when they're asked to be one of the stars of it, their title matches, their matches of importance. And for this one, I'm giving them both a 4. And here's my reasoning on this. As great as the both of them are, and they're both great, don't get me wrong, they're both fantastic wrestlers that have had great matches. But here's the real question. Can you name a standout match from either guy? The most memorable Booker T match is his WrestleMania match against Triple H, and that's memorable for all the wrong reasons. You may say one of their title runs is memorable, which, yeah, they are. I would say Scott's most memorable match is him and Rick Steiner versus the Outsiders, one, in my opinion, his best match of his career. But you don't really hear much talk about them and great matches. If you talk about the late 90s, early 2000s, you hear about, like, Mankind and the Rock, Mankind and The Undertaker, Stone Cold and The Rock, Stone Cold and The Undertaker, Undertaker and Kane, and so on and so forth. You don't really hear some of the great stuff that they did because, not saying that they were bad, I just don't think they had any of those upper echelon, quote-unquote, to give a Meltzerism, 5-star matches, but they were definitely solid. That leads us to our totals. For Booker T is getting a 36. For Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner's getting a 34. But wait, we have the bonus. And how you get bonus points, there are 5 bonus points that can be won. If you go to my community page, every Wednesday I put up a poll. This week it may be a little bit late because I believe Wednesday is Christmas or Christmas Eve, so you may see the poll a little bit later, but I digress. On that, you're given a simple question: who do you think is better? It's open for anybody to vote on. With that, with almost 700 votes, the winner of that poll and the 5 bonus points, Booker T. So Booker retains. Booker ends up with 41 total when you add the 5 bonus in. This could have went either way. These guys are so evenly matched in their careers, mirror each other in a lot of different ways. Both fantastic, both wrestlers I enjoyed watching most of their entire careers. I really enjoyed them. But in the end, I guess it's all hail King Booker, as Booker took the win. Keep your eye out. Like I said, I don't know when I'm going to get to pull out. I'll probably put it out Wednesday, even if it is Christmas or Christmas Eve, because it'll be open until I record my next video, so it'll be there for you. Just keep checking on the community page. And with all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this is Who Was Better.